Hi everyone. This is going to be a little different because God wanted me to show how it is that He has me come up, how He gives me His words. And I guess somebody had a question about how is it that I'm delivering these words and how is it that I that God does it through me. I don't know. But so and I'll show you. He's been giving me. Now, when I first started delivering words, they were mostly testimonials and they were storyline style. So while he wasn't giving me scripture, he would give me the stories in the Bible, whether it was Elijah's story or it was Daniel's story or Esther's story. So he wouldn't give me the actual scripture because in that moment, there were too many of his children who were feeding like they were still infants, but they were no longer. They were now mature in their walk with him. And he felt like if he continued force feeding the information to you, that you wouldn't do it on your own. So he led me to go in reverse, where I wasn't providing scriptures, I was only providing the stories, and it was your job to go to him and get the scriptures that were specific for you. And you can see, I mean, he's had me, and this is just one notebook. This is just since I've been back from where I was. This is how he's led me. You know, he'll give me words throughout the day. I'll write them down, and then he'll give me information. And so here we are. Anyway, so this is part 5 of the series. And I believe this is the closing of that series that I've been doing of Do My Prophets No Harm. And I know I laughed in the title, not because it's a funny topic, but the way that God works through me is He knows I need no explanation. So He will cut me off, He will redirect me. Sometimes He will have me turn around and leave after just arriving to a location, and I'll be there for maybe a second or two, and he'll go, no, instead go over here and do this. And I've come to realize that the reason God does this is because there is something the enemy has brought forth that is either going to cause me to have to deal with witchcraft that I didn't have to deal with before, or he's put up a roadblock for me that will cause me to be delayed or will cause me to be to take a detour that God didn't intend for me to take. And it has happened to me in the past where especially when I was just starting to walk with God again and listening to his voice and listening, my flesh would come up and give me different directions or give me the feeling of, no, why don't we go this way? You know the path, you know this, you know that. But sometimes in going the way I know, things would happen. Things that would cause me to either be delayed or get stuck in something or almost get into a car accident, or I'd end up hitting a curb, or, things like that. So it was never any fun for me because of the way that it was happening. So I've learned to drown out everything else and just focus on God. If God redirects me, and it kind of sounds like I'm saying the same thing about the two different ways, but when you walk with God, you understand, you know. And anyway, um, okay, so he's been having me. Yesterday was Sunday. I watch virtual church. There is a church in Virginia that he has been having me follow for the last year and a half. Um, and James D. Laudermilk is the prophet who runs the church, him and his wife. And they are very anointed. They are very strong in the spirit. They are very close to God's heart. And he has Thursday fire nights, which is where God will come into the room and basically prophesy over the lives of his children about what is coming. And I've been previewed, he's prophesied over my life. And some of the things have come to fruition, some of them have yet to come to fruition, but God had already spoken to me about the things that were coming. I just didn't know how they were going to come to fruition. The way I thought isn't the way they're coming. So, I'm still waiting. So, this Sunday he was talking about the anointing of God and how you must walk in purpose. How the more you walk in purpose, the more blessings you will receive. And it's true. Even though I'm living in my car, even though to the eyes I am not, God's hands isn't over my life. But when you look closer, when you take a deeper, closer look into my life, you see him. I moved to California with one job, and I got that job not through my flesh, but Lucifer had his hand in my life so much more than God did. And not because of anything that I was doing, but because of the witchcraft, because of the bad thoughts, the evil words that were being said over my life, because of the bloodline curses. All those things worked against me, but Satan still couldn't keep me down. God still blessed me, even though I was in the middle fighting Lucifer and fighting his words and fighting his fear and fighting his minions and his spirits that kept coming after me and kept, I had so many monitoring spirits around me. I had no idea until God started to open my eyes. So think of it like you being submerged in hell, and you are the only light, and everything around you is evil. But somehow you're still getting God's blessings. So now look at it the other way. Now your light has gotten bigger. So your area, your circumference has gotten wider. And now the enemy, Lucifer, and his monitoring spirits and his witches and his warlocks and his demons and, can't come close to me. And God is now leading me to the places where his children run the business. Yes, I'm not making what I was making before, but I'm happier. I feel lighter. I feel at peace. I feel grace. I feel the love of God around me and in me, which is not how I felt before. Before making all that money, I still felt alone. I felt discouraged. I felt abandoned. I felt lost. And I was making the kind of money that, you know, people would be jealous over. But I had all these inadequacies inside of me. And when God pulled me out of that, and this is why my walk has had to be so much different from some of his other children, because of the evil that was around me. I was so submerged in the evil. Even though at the core of me, I was still a good child of God. I still believed in him. I still loved him. There was so much evil around me that the corruption and the nastiness of the world was starting to seep in. And before my heart could change, God yanked me out. And because of the mirroring curses, because of the attachments to my life, to my life source, to my spirit, this woman that raised me, the way that she cursed me, she no longer had to have me tell her what I wanted from God, or what God was giving me, or telling me I was going to get. Now she could just walk into my dreams and she could pull them out of my mouth, because she made me believe in my dreams that she was God. And what I was talking to was her. And God finally revealed all of that, because she created a labyrinth in my mind that was so complicated and it started when I was a child. She built one bridge, and then she built another staircase, and then she built another staircase and another bridge and another this and another that. So my mind growing up started assimilating these bridges and these staircases part of my identity. And I began to get lost, which is why now God is delivering his judgment words, because of these individuals who have put their mouths on his children, who have tried to continue doing the evil that he has told them, not just in dreams, not just in visions, but he has told them. He has visited them, and he has shown them that they are going to face judgment, and the judgment that they have brought upon themselves is death. And this is not a death of, oh, it's going to be a spiritual death. No, this is a physical death. And there are some of these individuals that God isn't going to kill them, because he wants them to see our success come to fruition through his hand. So what he is going to do is he is going to punish them using their children, using their loved ones, using the things that are important to them, because they did not listen, because they did not follow his instruction, because they thought that he was the God of no action, that he was the God of no punishment. And that is not the truth. So this morning, and he's had me in a rest, even though I'm giving these judgment words, he's had me in a rest. And that's how these judgment words have been coming, because I'll sit there and I'll just be contemplating what it is that he wants me to say. I'll be thinking about the Bible and what chapters I should be reading, and I'll be thinking about what words I should be, paying attention to, or things like that. And as you can see, this Sunday, God had me focus on the questions. What is in you that you fear? There is no fear when God is in you. And he's been telling me to go back to the basics, the beginning principles, Principles 101. Now, as I've grown in my walk with God, I started out as Moses, the deliverer. that is where he had me beginning. He had me taking up that walk with, because my life, it took 40 years. 40 years God allowed them. And he didn't allow them because he wanted to punish me. He allowed 40 years because I kept praying for his grace. I kept praying for his peace, for his love. And I kept asking him for time. I said, Father, give them time. Give them more time. Give them more time. Give them more time. Give them more time. 40 years he gave them. 40 years he gave Pharaoh to do the right thing for his people. 40 years. The reason God had me be in that moment, be like Moses, is because this woman is not my mother, and the man who raised me is not my father. I was given to them, just like Moses was given to the Pharaoh and the Pharaoh's daughter, to raise and to love and to cherish. And instead they taught him to beat and be ugly to the Israelites, his own people. I was given to these individuals because they were supposed to raise me. They were supposed to love me and cherish me and raise me in a happy home. But God knew it wasn't going to happen. God knew what they were going to teach me. God knew that I was going to be humbled and that I was going to be mistreated and that I was going to be forced to be a slave in the homes of this woman. And I say homes because we moved around a lot. And when Father delivered me and he brought me out of Egypt, it was like Moses. He sent me out to the wilderness where there was no water, there was no anything. In fact, the wind was insane. And if you remember, if any of you have ever watched The Prince of Egypt, the cartoon, well, they don't call it a cartoon. It's called I don't remember what they call the animated series. It's an animated series. When he runs away from Pharaoh because he killed the soldier, and he runs into the wilderness, there is a strong wind and there was no water, and he ended up catching a ride with a camel, or a camel thought his hair was grass and yanked him and pulled him all the way to the well. That's how God delivered me from this woman, from the grapples of these people. Because every person that I came into contact, if they came into contact with her, she showed them how to use witchcraft to latch on to me. And not just to me, to my children, to my bloodline. So they were basically siphoning my blessings out of my bloodline into their lives. So when I finally came out of the wilderness and he sent me to California, he was still telling me that I was like Moses. He was still giving me the feeling of Moses and the feeling of, when Moses met his family, and, he wanted to stay with his family, but God wanted him to go back to bring the Israelites out of Egypt. I went back to California to want to be with my family, and I didn't want to leave them because I felt safe. I felt happy. I finally found my place. I found the people that treated me like I was part of something more than just myself. And then he took me away from them. And because of the mirroring things and the things that they've latched onto, he had to take me all the way down. He had me leave my job. He had me move out of my apartment. He had me live in my car. And because it takes time for these manifestations to take effect, so basically they were still latching onto me. They were still siphoning my blessings out of me. But now the blessings they were siphoning out felt more like curses to them, because God had me living in my car. God had it raining, and I was constantly crying, and I was hungry, and I was cold, and I was desolate, and I thought I was being punished. But then God suddenly showed me. He said, have you gone a day without eating? Granted, it wasn't the kind of food that I would have wanted, but it was still food. Granted, it wasn't the way that I would have wanted to eat, but I was still eating. I didn't go hungry. I was fed. I wasn't satisfied, but I was fed. My dog was fed. My dog should have died, and yet he lives because the witchcraft began impacting him, and I began praying to God. I'm like, why am I suddenly okay, but my dog isn't? And God said that he allowed the curses and he redirected the curses and the evil thoughts to my dog. And while I looked fine, my hair was getting longer. Yes, I had lost weight, but I didn't look like what I was going through. And then he brought me a job, and that job brought me food, and that job brought me money. And granted, I didn't use the money for myself. I used the money for what God told me, because I looked to him. And the reason he's having me go through all these scenarios with you is because he then showed me that I was now Peter, the fisher of men, because I stepped out on the ocean, out on the water. I took a leap of faith, and sometimes I felt like I was going down in the water, and God would pick me back out. And then I felt like I was falling in the water again, and he'd pick me back out. And then he showed me Elijah, and he confirmed it with the juniper trees. When Jezebel killed all of God's prophets because she wanted to manipulate the words that were coming out into the world to be according to her will. And Elijah was her target to get him to sleep with her. And when he declined her, she decided to take matters into her own hands and told her husband that he tried to take advantage of her. So he ran away. But God sent Elijah back. He sent Elijah back with a word of judgment, a word that he had to deliver. And this is what God gave me today. He gave me Jeremiah 51, verse 52. I paraphrased it so that it would be easier to understand, because my version speaks in Old English. And while I understand it, not many people do. And the reason I understand it isn't because I have a, English degree or anything like that. It's just God has had me read books with Old English style writing, and it's been since I was in grade school, so I have learned to understand this language. God will give you the tools that you will need in the future, and he'll do it whenever he chooses. So, behold, the day has come, saith the Lord, that I will do judgment upon her, graven